We're going to call the public budget hearing of the Norfolk School Committee to order. Start with the roll call. Oh, sorry, we start with the roll call. We start at the end.
Yep. Lauren Lucas, Grace Locke, Lisa Sheldon, Jeff Quinn, Medora Champagne, Victoria Saldana,
So welcome and thank you for joining us tonight, and we are looking forward to having this opportunity to share with you the fiscal 2025 proposed budget. We'll take a few minutes to do probably a 20-minute presentation and walk through what our budget challenges are, how our budget history has shifted over the last 10 years. We'll talk about some of the budget demands and what we are proposing for next year. At the end of the presentation, we'll turn the meeting back over to our school committee chair, Medora, who will invite people to come up with questions or comments. All right, so I would just like to start by saying it's great to work in a community that consistently shows such strong support for education. We get not as great a turnout generally at our public hearing, but we do have, it's always filmed, and we have a lot of people that watch from home and also attend our town meeting in May. And we have a lot of parents that volunteer regularly in our school. We have senior citizens in Norfolk that volunteer in our offices and provide support throughout. So it's great to work with our presentation. If you didn't get a hard copy, there are barcodes so you can scan it to follow along. We always start any budget process by really considering the district's vision and mission statement, which you can see up on the screen. In difficult budget times or in times where we've had the opportunity to grow and expand programs, we always think as the budget subcommittee, as the administrative team in consultation and partnership with our teaching professional staff, we try to make sure that our budget decisions will have the highest return on academic achievement for our students and support the child and overall students' mental health and well-being. So that is the vision and mission that drives the budget and also drives our district planning and strategic planning efforts. The presentation tonight, I'll start by talking about the budget history, so what our budgets look like over the past 10 years. We'll take a look at our per pupil spending comparison, so how Norfolk spending compares. You're looking at me like you can't hear. Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. How Norfolk per pupil spending compares to other regional districts and like communities. We'll talk about the 2025 budget request and what are some of the drivers, some of the critical needs that we're trying to support in this budget. We'll talk about enrollment and class size projections, so what that will look like going into next year, and then what we have as unfunded budget needs. This budget is the first budget in the last, I've been here for 12 years, this was the hardest budget to prepare. There is some significant revenue shortfalls at the town and across the community that have driven our budget, and we have to make cuts for the first time in a long time. So in the presentation, we'll also talk about those reductions and how that will impact programming moving forward. So budget history. One of the important things to know about the community of Norfolk is that we are a growing school community. Back in 2014, you can see we had about 869 students in the district between the H. Olive Day School and the Freeman Kennedy combined. And that enrollment since 2014 has steadily grown every year. In 2024, we had 979 students, so that's a net growth of 110 children from 2014. We project to open in 2025 based on current enrollment and currently registered students with an additional 25 students. So we will have a net gain of 135 students over the past 10 years. Just if you want to take a look at the enrollment growth by building, from 2014 to 2024, the bulk of new enrollment hit the H. Olive Day School. So as many of you, if you have students in H. Olive Day, you've been hearing we're out of space at the H. Olive Day School, and we have been for a while. It's because we have almost 100 more students at the H. Olive Day than we did back in 2014. So the growth in population was most pronounced at the H. Olive Day, but you're starting to see when Freeman Kennedy opened in 2014, we had 530 students. Enrollment growth at Freeman was flat for a while. You actually saw it dip for a few years and then start to recover back in about 2019, and the growth is now rolling up through the Freeman Kennedy. So next year we expect to have 569 students at the Freeman for an overall growth of 39 students.
As the students in the H. Olive Day and these larger classes, we have a kindergarten class of 171 students. As those larger classes roll up, we expect that growth to hit Freeman. And the demographic studies that we have done are showing that in the next 10 years, we're going to see more growth at the upper elementary school than we are at the lower elementary school. So that is expected to continue and even out between the two. It's important to note, too, that there are costs to grow. So beyond the space demands in the school environment and the shortage that we have of space at the H. Olive Day, when we are bringing new students into the district, the state looks at what we spend to educate each child. Right now, the state average is close to $18,000 a student. If you're bringing in 10 new students, there's $180,000 of costs that accompany those students. So I think it's really critical, and those costs are absorbed. We have to add classroom teachers to keep class sizes within the school committee policy. We've had our special education population has grown proportionally with the overall growth in the district. So we've had staff for special education and paraprofessional staff. We also have had to increase the staffing for special subjects like art, music, and physical education to accommodate providing instruction to more homeroom classes. We have several classes that, because of the size of the class, we have to split lunches into 2 lunch sessions. We can't serve lunch to all the students at once. So we've had to expand our lunch program, add additional staffing for that, and stretch the hours. So there's a lot of hidden costs that accompany that growing enrollment. And I think that's really important, and I'll come back to it when we talk about per pupil growth and per pupil expenditure.
So
I'll turn it to Marion.
Nope, sorry. So our federal funding, unfortunately, is declining. We're anticipating a reduction in Title I and Title IIA. We saw a decline in our Title IV budget allocation from the federal grant in the amount of about $10,000 last year, so that's not included on this slide. But for Title I and Title IIA, we use those funds for part-time math specialists at the HRD, as well as some added professional development. And so we've had to take those funds and incorporate them into the budget. We don't anticipate receiving them next year. In addition to which, the allocations are generally were based on our free and reduced lunch eligibility population, which has changed over time from roughly 4.7% in 2019 to 7.1% in 2023. Unfortunately, the federal census data hasn't kept up with that, and so it doesn't do us well. It underestimates our economic needs in Norfolk. So that's also why we're seeing some reductions in our federal funding. And then you can see that our post-pandemic federal funds, those have all been expended as of 2023. We received a substantial amount as a result of the pandemic, and all of those funds were expended last year, and our student needs still remain. Chapter 70, the main takeaway for Chapter 70 is that it impacts all communities very differently. It's a complicated formula. It's a formula based on funds that are. It's a formula driven, and the state allocates those funds to the town of Norfolk as a whole, which offsets the cost of education in the town. Currently, about 23.4% of Norfolk's budget is funded through Chapter 70 money. And based on the relative wealth of Norfolk as a whole, we are known as a minimum aid community, which basically means that we will only get $30 per pupil going forward for the foreseeable future, unless there are significant changes to the enrollment or the population.
So I'm going to talk about competitive grant opportunities. So in response to growing needs, the Massachusetts Department of Education has made funding available to districts through competitive grants to address staffing shortages, support curriculum innovation and adoption, as well as to expand professional development programming. So over the past 2 years, the district has repeatedly applied to the state to secure grant funding to offset local costs, which is, from personal experience, it's a very time-consuming process. But unfortunately, we have been repeatedly denied because we do not meet the priority areas that are outlined in the slide presentation for funding. So districts across they're all competitive grants, so districts who meet those criteria outlined are given priority. So the grants that we have listed for as examples of ones that we have applied, we have not qualified for. So but still we are required to comply with new mandates and regulations despite lack of access to the revenue sources. So it kind of puts us in a tough position. The next slide I'm going to cover student achievement. I'm not going to go into detail because we gave a pretty thorough presentation. You have access to our MCAS slides, which kind of gives you in great detail. It's on our website. We also did the benches and benchmark report, which is also available on our website, which gives more insight into how we're performing with our district benchmarks and other information. But I do want to just kind of quickly summarize that our ELA MCAS scores, as you can see for yourself, have been declining. In 2019, the average student in the meet and exceed category, we were in the 67th, almost 68th percentile. And last year, only 55% of our students were in a meet and exceeding category. So that was a 12% decline. There were definitely outside factors, as we know, like the pandemic impacted the test. But still, we are seeing that trend through our district benchmark as well, that our overall scores are in a declining trend. So last year we had to delay our ELA adoption due to financial limitations. And of course, we're committed to meeting the state standards. So we just completed a very thorough ELA adoption process. I will be presenting next month, the little plug over here, at the April school committee about the program that we have selected. So if you're interested, you'll be able to kind of hear more information about that, and it will be submitted to the school committee for their approval. But we are in a situation that only partial funding is available in this budget cycle. But regardless, for the ELA adoption, but regardless, we're moving with the implementation of the ELA program, which we will is slated for September of 2024. In terms of math MCAS, so we did see some recovery in mathematics. So just for comparison purposes, 69% of our students were in the meeting or exceeding category in 2019. We are about 60% of our students are in the meeting exceeding category. So even though there's some recovery, it really does not match where we were before 2019. Our math MCAS scores in 2023 results align with those of similar towns, yet we've observed a decline compared to pre-pandemic levels, as I mentioned. We're preparing for a math review starting the spring of 2024 to ensure current programs adhere to the state's high quality standards. So we'll be going through a similar process that we just completed for ELA, because we're always looking to make sure that our curriculum aligned with the high standards that the state has set, and also that we're really meeting the needs of all our students. One thing I want to point out, also just to bring your attention, that when we kind of did a little bit of a study and look at other districts, we do want to highlight that the higher performing districts demonstrate the benefits of increased funding for curriculum adoption and additional instructional support, such as coaches, direct services to students, tutoring, supplemental curriculum materials. We definitely recognize, and I think we're all on the same page, that the importance of adequate funding as it directly enhances the instructional quality and student achievement.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about per pupil spending comparisons. Over the past 8 years, you can see where the state's per pupil spending is in that red line, and Norfolk's per pupil spending is on the blue line below it. Back in 2016, we were about $295 off from that from the state spending. Norfolk spending was only $295 per pupil, lower than the state. You can see how that gap has widened tremendously over the past 7 years to what's about $2,300 almost dollars at this point in time. Our budget increases in 17 and 18 didn't keep up with our enrollment growth at that time, and the funding gap has certainly widened over that time, while our enrollment has increased. Another comparison that we show is the Department of Ed has districts that are demographically and structurally similar to Norfolk. And so they've identified the districts that you see on this list here as comparables to us. We use those kinds of comparables as benchmarks to evaluate our programs, our instruction, our student achievement and attendance rates, class size, and other measures of educational quality. And so when we compare our budget and staffing and per pupil spending, you can see that all of those districts listed in green are spending at least the state average or above. And those districts below that green section, of which Norfolk is one, in the yellow, have consistently spent below the state average. You can see that there are only 3 communities in the past few years that have consistently spent below the state average, Norfolk being one of them, only second to Berkeley above spending. In terms of charter school revenue, so parents have options. They have options to send their students to public schools. They have options to send their students to charter schools. We have 2 charter schools nearby. They're fairly large in our immediate area, and when we talk about programming, you know, we need to keep up with our programming to compete with charter schools. Our Ben Franklin Charter School expanded in several years ago to almost double its size. The charter school in Foxborough serves almost 1,630 students. And when a student enrolls in the charter school, the state aid follows that student. So the town of Norfolk would lose approximately $15,907 for each student that goes out into in-state revenue. We would lose that amount for each student that attends a charter school instead of going into Norfolk public schools. And you know, if you calculate that out, it's approximately, for every 4 students, we'll lose the equivalent of a full teacher salary, roughly. And so it's important for us to maintain our instructional programming and class sizes so that we so as not to risk losing funding or losing parents having the choice to send their students elsewhere.
Okay, I'm quickly going to talk about the 2025 budget picture and the budget drivers. So our 2025 proposed budget request is just over $15,565,080. It reflects a 3.17% increase over fiscal 2024. I'm going to talk a little bit about that after, because the overall growth is 4%, but we're going to talk about applying some one-time revenue to bring the cost down. That budget proposal will allow us to meet all of our contractual obligations. So that's teacher salaries, our COLA that we have proposed for non-union staff, the cost of absorbing a new transportation contract. So it allows us to meet those contractual obligations. It allows us to provide appropriate funding for special education and pupil services. It allows us to maintain the current mental health staffing we have. We talked about in last year's budget presentation that we have seen increasing needs, behavioral and mental health needs among our student population, and that for many children, school is the only place that they are able to access those kinds of counseling supports. So we have a good student to counselor ratio, and this budget allows us to maintain that. It also lets us keep our class sizes within the class policy limits set by the school committee, and that is under 22 students in K through 2 and under 25 students in grades 3 through 6. Lastly, this partially funds the adoption of a new ELA program. As Vicki said, we have gone through an ELA review. We know we need a new program. We have seen our student scores drop after the pandemic, and recovery has been slow. We are in a budget freeze right now in trying to generate and save some revenue to offset those costs and pre-purchase some materials because we cannot fund the full costs in the operating budget. We're also looking and continuing to see if any new grants come out. Department of Ed had some initial startup grants. They haven't issued anything recently, but we're continuing to look for alternate sources of funding. We do anticipate moving this forward, but it's important to note that it is only partially funded through the budget request. So the overall on high level budget changes, and you can get a copy of the full budget. We had some hard copies up here and they're also available online. But on a high level, the changes from fiscal 24 to 25, we are looking at about $479,000 in costs for bringing forward our current staff. So that's steps and lane changes and COLAs for our professional staff. We have about $32,000 in other contractual benefits that will be increasing next year. We are budgeting a 2% cost of living adjustment for all of our paraprofessional and non-union staff. And we, at the time of the budget preparation, knew of 2 teacher retirements, and that will generate about $79,000 in savings. So the net change in just carrying forward the staff is $619,000. We recognize that unfortunately the town can't fund that. $619,000 doesn't even touch the expense changes or the ELA adoption, so we had to make reductions to staffing in order to bring forward a budget that the town could feasibly absorb. So salary reductions and staffing reductions for next year, we are eliminating a 1.0 or a full-time technology integration teacher. We currently have 2. We have one at the Freeman Kennedy School and one at the H. Olive Day. They provide both direct services and instruction to students for our technology and digital literacy standards. They also do in-class push-in and collaboration around research projects and other technology and design projects. We are reducing that to 1 position that will be district-wide. It will have an impact on how our technology program operates, and Vicki will talk about that a little bit later in the budget presentation. We are also not refilling a math specialist teacher position. We had a mid-year retirement, so we had somebody retire from a math specialist position at the Freeman Kennedy in January. We have a substitute in that position currently, and going into next year, that position will be cut. We will be hiring a paraprofessional staff member who will work with our licensed math specialist teachers to provide additional support for students, but that professional position will be eliminated from the budget. We are also blessed to have library assistants at both of our school libraries. They help with pulling resources for teachers for upcoming units, making sure that they're requesting and bringing in library and print materials to supplement instructional units for students. They do all of the management and inventory in the library. We have to cut both of the library assistants, so our libraries will not have any professional staffing support. We will have to resume what we have done in the past and rely on parent volunteers to help our libraries operate. It will change the library program again, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. We are eliminating 2.3 paraprofessional positions. It's actually 3.3. We are down 1 kindergarten aide, and then there's going to be 2.3 additional positions cut. But as I just mentioned, we are hiring a paraprofessional to replace the math specialist. So the net change for those is a negative 2.3 positions. And we are still working on finalizing another 0.3 of professional position reductions. That will yield a total of 5.4 positions eliminated for a salary reduction of about $250,000. We have been really trying to look creatively about how else we can offset some costs. Currently, the state of Massachusetts has approved program funds to support free lunch for all students. The federal government had done that for the past 2 years. So we have a food service revolving account that has a balance at this point. So we are going to offset and charge a portion of the day custodial salaries to the food service because they support the cafeteria and food service operations. So we're making that's just an internal transfer where we're charging that revenue stream to offset those salaries. And since the budget was first developed, we have another teacher retirement that was unexpected that will generate some additional savings. So between those other adjustments, that's another $45,000, which brings the staffing reductions down by close to $300,000. On the expense side, we are budgeting $125,000 for the new curriculum adoption. The quotes that we were getting for a new program are closer to $250,000. So again, this is only partially funding that. We're hoping to pre-purchase some materials with the budget freeze we have in place. A budget freeze means we are not filling open positions at this time. We are not approving any additional purchases to generate end-of-year savings to help support this adoption. FK services and HOD services and supplies are up slightly next year. This has a lot to do with enrollment and some of the curriculum material costs that are increasing. Our special ed instructional service line is up slightly, a couple of 300,000. That supports all of the program needs that we have for students and their to provide appropriate educational services to meet their needs. Special education costs are offset by a program that's state generated called the Circuit Breaker. The state provides reimbursement for high-cost educational programs, and we will be receiving or applying about $89,000 in circuit breaker reimbursements next year to offset the cost. Our overall transportation contract, we're anticipating, we are getting ready to bid this out. We're at the end of a 3-year contract. We are estimating, based on past history trends, that contract will be up about $34,000. On the district level and on the facilities level, we've made some significant cuts to expenses to try to streamline services. So there's about $18,000 between the two lines in reductions. And then we do have some increased costs for technology network. A lot of that has to do with cybersecurity and our student information system that are sunsetting that we need to upgrade. So the net change on the expense side is $388,000. Am I talking to none? Yeah. Before me? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so in order to balance the budget, again, I talked earlier about we're going to be applying 2 sources of one-time non-recurring revenue. One of that is we have a special education tuition account. We have a regional partnership with Rentham and Plainville. When we have students who have unique needs, we may not have an appropriate peer group or program within the district, and so sometimes we will tuition students into a program in Rentham or Plainville. We try the best that we can. All students deserve to be educated in the least restrictive environment in the context of their home community. If that can't happen, then having students attend Rentham or Plainville allows them to work with a peer group that will age up with them in the regional middle school system. So over the past 4 or 5 years, we have had students from both Plainville and Rentham tuitioned into the district. That tuition goes into a revolving account to offset special education costs. So we have $108,000 in that account. We are recommending applying the full balance to help offset costs for next year of that revenue. And then additionally, back in 2019, we worked with the town to establish a special education stabilization fund. At that time, the district put about half of the funding in. It was unspent funds from a fiscal year. And the town matched that. And we established this fund to allow the district to respond to needs of students that might move into the district that were unbudgeted, so that there was no delay in services and we could access and support students appropriately as cases arise. We have $250,000 in that account, and we are recommending applying $125,000 to this budget to help manage costs. Again, that is for special education costs. That's what the account was established for, and that's where those funds will go. I do want to comment that we have, and the budget subcommittee, Lauren Vives and Lisa Sheldon serve on that. We've worked very closely with the town. We've tried to be good partners. The town is facing a very significant revenue shortfall, and it's affecting not just the Norfolk Schools budget, but the King Philip budget, as many of you have heard, police, fire, all town departments. So we have worked really collaboratively. We were all very reluctant to apply one-time revenue. When you apply one-time revenue, you're balancing a budget with a funding source that won't be there next year. So this budget, before we do any increases going into the next year, we're going to be $250,000 short. It's going to create a very difficult fiscal 26. At the same time, all departments are taking that cut. So King Philip is using part of their emergency deficiency fund to balance their budget. The town is probably going to be recommending using some free cash. It's a really tough year, and we felt as a committee, and feel free to jump in, but we were uncomfortable cutting the budget any further than we have, because at this point, if we were to make additional reductions and not use this revenue, that's coming from salary teaching positions. There is no room in the expense side of the budget to reduce another $250,000. That said, the town is working with a master planning group, looking at how to bring in and generate more revenue. There's going to have to be further conversations because this won't be sustainable long term, but we felt this was the best way to maintain educational integrity going into next year and give us time to work collaboratively with the town on a long-term plan. So with that said, we'll be applying about $233,000 of one-time non-recurring revenue. We also always work really hard. We recognize that when in Norfolk, where we don't have commercial revenue, the schools and all of the operating budgets are supported by taxpayers. We try very hard to be fiscally conservative. Every year we look for opportunities to generate savings. Several years ago, we partnered with the town and we restructured our facilities department. We now share a facilities director and an assistant facilities director, which generates savings not just for the school, but also for the town. That's about $25,000 in savings every year for us. Last year, we also regionalized our school lunch program. So prior to that, we had a full-time school food service director here in Norfolk. We now have a full-time food service director that is shared between the 3 elementary districts. That's generated about $50,000 in savings annually. We always try to partner with our neighboring districts to cost share professional development. As small districts, sometimes we have professionals that are very small departments and it's hard to meet their needs through the standard professional development programming. We have 2 art teachers in Norfolk. When we can collaborate and share resources with the other district, we can bring in better training and professional development and also share and distribute those costs. So we take advantage of that. We do have, and worked hard, we have a shared regional wellness director who does a tremendous amount of grant writing for the districts. She was able to secure a lot of funding throughout all of the pandemic. And one of the grants she applied for us next year is a Metro West Health Foundation that's offsetting the cost of a salary for one of our mental health staff members. It was a 2-year grant. $30,000 was applied to this year's budget, and that will carry over. So with cost-saving efforts, we see about $129,000 projected in savings for next year. Vicki, do you want to talk about some of the competitive grants? While we've had challenges, we do have some pending, so fingers crossed.
I'm sorry, I thought it was yours.
I can do it if you want.
Sure. Yeah.
So we have about 4 competitive grants that we're in the process of actively pursuing. We have a growing population in Norfolk of students that are coming into the district as English language learners. When I first started in 2013, we had 1 student. We are now about 30 that are receiving direct instruction in English. So we have this year wrote a regional grant. Vicki coordinated it with the assistant superintendents in the other districts to establish an LPAC. An LPAC is like the CPAC. The CPAC is our Special Education Parent Advisory Council, and their charter is to gather information to provide support to families whose students are accessing different types of services, as well as consultation to new families in the district who might be looking for information about our programs and the resources in the community. They also serve in advisory capacity to the Norfolk School Committee. And LPAC does the same thing. It's a collaborative effort to bring the voice of parents of students that are English language learners forward to help us inform our programming and our practices, as well as to provide resources and supports for other families entering. So we have a regional continuation grant pending that will allow that funding to go into a 2nd year. We have, again, Dot Pearl had written a grant for a Care Solace. That's a referral service for our students that need outside counseling beyond the school. If anybody has ever tried to navigate that process, unfortunately, while Norfolk has many wonderful things about it, there aren't a lot of local providers that are accepting clients at this point. The nearest hospital setting would be Norwood Hospital. There's significant wait times in order for families to access critical crisis or mental health services. Care Solace helps families navigate that process. It's an independent agency that will look to see who locally is providing or accepting clients, and it'll match families to providers that are taking on new clients. We are in the process of working with the town on a municipal cybersecurity grant. Sorry about that. That's about $100,000, and that is in process. It will allow us to develop and strengthen our cybersecurity network, both at the schools and in all town departments. That's $100,000. And then we are in the process also of procuring another professional development early literacy grant, and that's about $25,000. So these are all currently pending. Mary?
So one way to think about our budget is to look at our fixed costs, primarily fixed costs, and other discretionary spending. When you look at this graph, 93.1% of our costs go towards salaries, transportation, tuition, and utilities. 6.9% is available for materials and supplies, curriculum, textbooks, and other expenses. In a different breakdown, you can see our differences in salaries. So 69.5% of our budget is spent on professional staff salaries. 3.6 goes towards clerical staff, 13.7 goes to other salaries such as substitutes, assistants, food service, facilities, maintenance, technology. 8.5% of our budget goes towards services. The majority of that is our transportation contracts. And 3.1% is towards curriculum materials, supplies, and 0.7% towards other expenses, which is items such as contractual obligations for retirement and sick leave buyback. And 0.8% goes to fund our out-of-district tuitions, which is significantly lower than other districts across the Commonwealth.
Enrollment and class size projections for fiscal 2025. So you can see every year we move teaching positions around, and we do that in response to what we anticipate enrollment looking like at each grade level in order to keep our class sizes within the policy limits. Next year, we are anticipating a slight decline in kindergarten enrollment. We have 143 students currently registered. We typically pick up between 10 and 12 between the end of March and the new year. So we're anticipating that we're going to be close to 150. We'll have 7 sessions of kindergarten for an average class size of 21.4. First grade will be growing up. We'll need to add 2 additional teachers to the first grade. We have 6 right now, but we have 168 students moving up to first grade from kindergarten. That'll leave us with class sizes of 21. Grade 2 is going down a classroom. Class size is 19.5. Grade 3 is also going down a classroom with class sizes anticipated to be 20 and 21. Grade 4 will go up. We'll have a class size of 20.4 there. Grade 5 is going down. 21 average in there, and 6th grade will be the highest class size for next year. We'll have 6 6th grades, and our average classes there'll be classes of 22 and 23. Again, compared to our same regional counterpart communities, you can see Norfolk used to be back in 2014, 2015. When I was doing this presentation, we were at the top. We had the smaller class sizes compared to the other schools in the region. That isn't true anymore. We're closer to the middle or higher end compared to our other communities. Class size this year is 20, next year it'll be 21 as an average. As we talked about, this budget does fund what we think are the most critical priorities. To move forward with just a level service budget this year, we would have been bringing you a request for 8.9%. The town absolutely could not afford that. Before we've been working through this, we've made about $800,000 in cuts to get to the 4% budget, and there are some critical unfunded needs. So I'm going to let Vicki speak to that.
Sure. So I know we kind of talked a little bit about the positions that we had to reduce, but I just wanted to kind of, if you can bear with me and give me a minute of your time just to talk about kind of like the schools overall. And I think that I'm sure that you have seen that as well, especially if you have kids in the system, how much schooling has changed. And over the 15 years, we saw some drastic shifts in expectations that schools have in terms of the education that they have to provide. We've talked before about, schools have been implementing a very robust social emotional program, which was not available 15 years ago. Our standards have significantly increased. So over the last 20 years, we went from maybe having a 10-page full K through 12 standard to now it being over 150 pages of standards that we have to meet, that each educator is responsible for. And I feel like the biggest shift that I have seen, especially the last 5 years, is the expectation that the state is putting on schools in terms of kind of being more, they're giving us more directives under what we're expected to implement, which is putting strain on how our schools have been set up so far. So like our administrators have like doubled the expectations that administrators have had, like, from the past. I feel like our teachers have had to go from being generalists, especially elementary level, to really being specialists, because they are responsible for such deep content, knowledge, and expertise, like starting at kindergarten. So one of the ways that districts have tried to kind of support schools is by bringing in positions such as integration specialists, math specialists, literacy specialists, library media specialists, because one thing that those positions kind of offer is that the teachers that hold those positions have a specialized license, which gives them kind of expertise in that one area. So if you have a math specialist, like their whole focus is on math. They know math inside out. So if a teacher needs support because they have to know like 6 different standards, they have social emotional, they have math science, social studies, you know, like there's a list goes on and on. They have a colleague that is able to kind of bring the most research-based pedagogical approaches to the classroom, and that support is really critical because that partnership is what allows the teacher to be able to elevate the instruction, because as you can imagine, there's only so many hours in the day, so it makes it really difficult. So when we talk about the reduction of these positions, they do have an impact on our schooling. Like our tech integration specialists, like we always had a robust tech program. So when I got to Norfolk, like that was one of the things that I was blown away. Like our makerspace is amazing, you know, because I've worked in numerous districts and I was very proud that this is something that we have, you know, and that took a lot of effort and time, and to have somebody who has the expertise to be able to create that space where students are doing robotics, where students are exploring, you know, how to do programming, and those are all skills that are so necessary, as you know, like for kids to be able to move forward. I mean, there's a huge discussion around AI now, which is, you know, a whole like level, another level. So, when unfortunately having one tech integration specialist that now is going to be responsible for covering an entire district is going to really reduce her capacity of how much she can really reach students and be able to work with teachers. The same thing for a math specialist. Like we had a professional licensed staff member who was able to provide support for students, be able to provide support for teachers, and a paraprofessional, which they're amazing and they do like an incredible job, but it is, they're just not coming in with the same training as a math specialist would. So there is a little bit of a loss there. And also a library media specialist, like it's really gone beyond just like going to the library to have a read aloud. Like they partner with our teachers on projects, you know, they really, they bring in a lot of media specialty into their library classes. So they really kind of support what the integration specialist is doing. So the kids are really able to research not only in the classroom, but they're able to continue that in the library. And they also have a tremendous job. So like not having paraprofessional support is really gonna, again, be able to reduce of how much their capacity and what they're able to kind of offer. So I just wanted to kind of give you a picture of like why these positions are really important for districts nowadays, because it really has been such a significant shift in how schooling is kind of functions as a whole. So I think that the next slide kind of talks about restorations, and I know that it's a priority to everybody here that if there's any ability to be able to restore the positions that the technology integration teacher, the math specialist, library assistants, and the paraprofessionals would be the priority positions that we're looking to restore. One of the things that I want to kind of highlight on the list is the critical unfunded other staffing needs. So as we talked about the function of like the school buildings, it takes a lot, as you know, to kind of run a district. So so the other needs kind of include the clerical support for our business and HR offices, which are significantly understaffed. So our HR director she does payroll and human resources for one of the largest staffs that we have in our town. So that is without like any clerical support, or it's just her. She's a one-man show and she does an amazing job, but the job is really huge when you really think about how much human resources is involved, you know what I mean, and also what it takes to produce a payroll for all of our staffing in our school district. We also have a .4 chair, and just for comparison purposes, not that we want to compare to towns, but just to give you kind of an idea. Like for example, Rentham has two team chairs and we have a 0.4 and we have more students that we support, you know what I mean? So like that is a huge discrepancy for us too. So being able to that is definitely like a shortage that has been felt over the last couple of years. And again, like I said, the math specialists, like we were looking to increase our math specialist position. We have a part-time we have 2 full-time and 1 part-time math specialist. We're hoping to actually increase the math specialist position, but unfortunately we're reducing. And like I said, I just kind of mentioned the impact that those positions have. Anything else I missed?
And then on the expense side of the budget, for a number of years, we've talked about trying to eliminate band fees so that our band program would be free and available to all students. But right now, we use a portion of that fee to cover the cost of the salary, so we aren't able to do that at this time. And again, to fully fund the ELA adoption, we would need another $125,000, so it's only partially funded. And then lastly, our professional development programming line has been underfunded historically. In order to provide the kinds of training that we really need to support these new curriculum initiatives, we really need additional funding in that area. But these are things that are not included in the budget because of the current forecast and revenue shortfall across the town. And from there, I will turn it back to our school committee chair to invite questions and comments from the audience. So, Medora?
I officially invite questions and comments from the audience.
And if anybody wants to speak, this microphone is live, so you need to just come up, name, address, and then we're happy to respond.
And please don't be shy. We don't have any expectation that educational budgets are your forte. No question is, yeah.
My name is Rachel Sohn. I live at 16 Ridge Road. I understand that there's a shortfall or unfunded $125,000 of ELA.
Yep.
Not funded. I'm wondering whether or not there are any ideas about the funding of the $125,000. Yep. I also understand that the ELA curriculum was supposed to be adopted last year,
yes,
with a new math curriculum to be adopted this year.
Yep.
And what is anticipated relative to the budget for that math curriculum and also the shortfall of the $125,000 of the ELA curriculum.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. So one of the things that we've done already is we have instituted a budget freeze for this year. So we are not filling open positions. We are not processing any orders at this point for anything other than critical supplies. The intent of the budget freeze is to generate some revenue savings in this fiscal budget to allow us to pre-purchase some of the new curriculum materials for the ELA adoption. So to the total cost of the adoption is $250. We're hoping to be able to generate a good portion of that in savings from the budget freeze this year. We're also looking at some potential grant opportunities. And if we can't get to that, we may have to make some additional reductions. But at this point, we are anticipating moving forward with a full adoption. We can't delay it any further. Our kids need these new materials. So we are exploring outside revenue, a budget freeze, and other strategies to try to generate that savings and balance that out this year. The math program review will take place next year. At the end of next year, we'll be recommending a new math program, and that will be reflected in the 26 budget. No, that's okay.
I'm a lawyer. I can't help myself.
No, that's okay.
So in terms of a budget freeze, how much are you anticipating in savings from a budget freeze? And unfortunately, what other reductions are you looking at to pay for the ELA curriculum? Because obviously it has to be adopted and it has to be paid for.
Yep.
Where's the money going to come from and who's going to suffer the most from it?
Yep. So right now, Miriam, I don't know if you can speak to where we are tracking in terms of the potential revenue savings this year.
Yeah, I don't
It's a
know
little
that
early.
I have a specific answer for that right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, it's a little bit early. So we're hoping to see, a reasonable amount, maybe 50, 75,000, but that might be high of that revenue shortfall. Again, as I said, we are still looking for competitive grants. We have talked to the town about capital funding. The town of Norfolk does not approve capital projects till the fall. But there are ways that we could look at purchasing some additional supplemental materials for the new adoption at a later point. So we are looking at multiple ways to fund that, and we will be moving it forward. So.
Hi. Tanya Sigmund 31 Frederickson Road. Have you considered any creative ways to bring in additional revenue? Like, for instance, I know the preschool's a revenue generator, and there are huge wait lists for that. Or after-school programs. I know SAC has a long wait list, which is also a revenue generator.
Yep.
The rec does a lot that families actually use to access, and we pay the rec. So I was just wondering if you thought about other creative ways to bring in additional revenue. And then the second question is, when does the ELA curriculum actually have to be solidified and adopted, or paid for, I guess?
Yeah, okay. So in terms of other ways to bring in revenue, we have looked at that. We did raise preschool tuitions last year, and we've done market analysis where we didn't do a second increase this year because we're pretty competitive in terms of our rates with neighboring communities. Unfortunately, we can't grow the preschool program or expand it because we don't have any space. So we're capped by space for that. We are looking at restructuring SAC for next year. We're pursuing a couple of different options to increase the revenue that we can bring in from that, but also to bring people in off the wait list. So we are looking at potential ways to restructure and create more opportunities and potentially offer a shorter extended day program and a full extended day program that would allow us to bring in a lot more people. So that's something that we've heard a lot from the community as a critical need. And Tony Davis has done a great job at trying to think creatively about how to shift that program. That program is a self-funding program, so most of the revenue that we bring in offsets the cost of the staff that we have for that in that revolving account. So it doesn't bring a lot new to the district. In terms of the ELA adoption, we will be, the ELA Curriculum Committee will be making a presentation in April to the school committee, and the school committee will be voting on that program, to adopt that program. We will be adopting and purchasing all the supplies over the summer with a September implementation date. So it will be rolled out in September. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Kristen Bewley, 5 Shady Way. I had a couple questions, and I think they're short questions.
Sure.
So is it all right if I
Yeah.
ask? Okay. You mentioned in the presentation losing students to charter schools. Do you have a number on how many students we've lost to charter schools in the last?
I could get that. I can tell you that I would want to double check that number. We have seen an increase in students being homeschooled or choosing private schools. So that trend from 2014 to now, we're up by about 50 students that are choosing homeschooling private. Primarily, it's homeschooling private that's grown. Charter's been pretty flat. I think last year we had 6 or 7 students out, but I would have to check the current enrollment numbers.
When you cut the math specialist position and you have a para in that position, it seemed like it indicated there are other math specialists in the district.
Yes,
How
we do.
many positions are left in that?
Do you want to talk about
Sure, we have 2 full-time math specialists and a .5 math specialist, and then there'll be a paraprofessional.
So 2.5 will be left?
that? Yeah.
Okay. And they're split between the 2 schools?
Yeah.
Yep.
And we will be restructuring that in order to, based on student data and looking at student needs, where we allocate, and we may be shifting people from one building to the other in order to spread those services in the most effective way.
Is their role more as a coach or more as a pull-out to provide services for students who are behind?
Both. They do.
Yeah, they do both. So it's we have like a 60-40 model, 60% student services and
40% coaching.
yeah. But really, it's never that. I think it's like 120%. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was a little confused at one point in the presentation that it seemed to indicate there was a retiring teacher where a position wouldn't be filled. Does that mean you're
The
losing?
math specialist.
So just the math specialist?
The math specialist. And then what we do for our budget purposes, we knew when we started the budget process, we had 2 teachers retiring. When a teacher retires, they're often going out at the top step, so at a higher salary, and we budget to hire someone new at a Master's 5 or Master's 6. So we factor in that savings. So we knew of 2 formal announced retirements when we started, which was at $79,000, and then after the fact, we just received notice recently of a late retirement, so that additional savings is calculated in there.
Got it. So not that
Yeah.
the position will be?
No.
Okay,
No,
got it.
those are just revenue savings from hiring someone lower on the salary than the exiting teacher.
Okay. one more question about, we don't pay for busing in Norfolk. Have we looked into?
We have, in the past, Norfolk has charged for busing. Under state law, we have to provide free transportation to any child who lives more than 2 miles from the school. You can charge a transportation fee for students that are within that 2 miles. However, it is predicated on the assumption that there are safe walking routes to school for students that live within those 2 miles. We do not have crossing guards, we do not have sidewalks in many locations, so that isn't true. So it would be a pretty significant equity and civil rights issue to arbitrarily charge some families and not others when there isn't truly a safe walking route to school.
The last thing that I wanted to inquire about, and this, you may not have this information, but Lincoln was at the top in terms of per pupil spending.
Yeah.
And they don't have a lot of industry in that town. So what are they doing differently in terms of to spend that much on students, $30,000 on students, and yet also have small class sizes and all those other things. So I'm just curious if you have any idea what they're doing differently.
My guess would be, what was that property?
Isn't there a military base?
There is a military base too there. But I don't know. I don't know the financials of Lincoln. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Yep, sure. Hi.
Eric Darling, 130 Warren. First off, thank you for putting together a budget, which is obviously under a lot of sort of financial pressure. That's hard to do when you have to do cuts. It's easy when you're flush with money, but it's harder to do it this way. So thank you for your work with this. This is probably more of a question for the town, but so on the revenue side, why are we in this situation? Can you share any information with that? Why is the revenue so much lower this year and versus previous years? And are we looking at this as a constant change now, or are we going to bounce back? Do we have any information on that?
So the town administrator is going to speak to that more in depth at the town meeting. I know there's a few factors that are driving the revenue shortfall. One is the cost of health insurance for employees went up significantly going into next year. So that is one of the budget drivers. I also know the assessment for Tri-County was higher than anticipated. The KP assessment is we're actually on the lower end, but because they have a significant budget shortfall, the total cost to Norfolk is up a little bit. Anita, you might know some of the other challenges. I hate to call on the audience, but I don't want to speak for the town. Those are ones that I'm aware of.
And those are all real.
Yeah.
There's also, we're building, Tri-County's building a new building, that is something that is not negotiable for us because we're part of the community supporting that. There's a number of variables. This isn't a short-term problem, it's going to be a long-term problem for the town, and we're well aware of that and trying to look at proactive ways where we aren't constantly tightening our belt, because as you can see from the slides, there's not much left to tighten, and so it's definitely a problem for the town, and we are looking at resources and opportunities and ways to rethink about what we're doing so that we aren't in this spot again and again.
And it's something
And I know
to think
Justin
about.
is planning to speak to that at town meeting and talk about. The town has engaged master planning company. They are looking at ways, and he has some creative ways that he's proposing bringing in some new revenue for next year. But it's a bigger hurdle than just bringing in a few extra dollars here. It's a pretty significant long-term challenge.
It does sound like the budget though has to be looked at as this isn't a temporary thing. This is a
long-term
permanent change to the funding that we have here.
Yep.
And we're seeing increases in the number of students also, so it's only going to increase costs without any increased revenue.
Exactly.
So it's just something that there's going to have to be some serious discussions with the town on.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
We've been talking about the concerns about growing enrollment for probably 10 years because the increased revenue we're getting from real estate is not offsetting the cost, and it's not just to schools. Increased enrollment has an impact on police and fire and all town services. So it is a significant problem, and I'm glad that they've engaged a master planner because there has to be a better strategy.
There are opportunities here. We can build in enough space in the new building or in Freeman Kennedy to have larger preschool, more tuitions, all these things. If you have a little bit more space, you can do these things and have more revenue.
And we also need to house the new students coming, so
Exactly.
that's
Thank
a
you.
separate project. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
So, yes.
Yes.
Tight Sigmund. So, following up on that point, what happens with the expansion project based on where we are budget-wise now because our enrollment continues to grow, right? So,
Yep.
how are we going to I guess, what are the plans for the expansion? That's my question.
So we are in the process of doing a new demographic study with another outside consultant. We had NESDEC do the initial projections, and we have a company called Demographic Analytic Advisors that is doing a new study to give us a second opinion on what the projected enrollment growth will be. They're looking at a number of factors. They're looking at real estate sales, birth rate, census data, development plans. They should have their final report to us within a week or so. The building subcommittee is reviewing that. If there's consistency between the two demographers in terms of what that enrollment picture looks like, we are in the process of under the oversight of the building committee, looking at other potential cost options. We have a plan for a brick and mortar project expansion project that would meet that growing needs. The town last year asked us to look at alternate plans that might be more cost effective. So we are in the process of looking at 3 different potential modular solutions and what that cost would be. The building committee is going to be bringing forward a recommendation to the town for what seems to be the most cost effective and best long-term plan to meet the enrollment growth. The town would then have to appropriate funding. That's through a debt exclusion, not through operating budget, to allow the town to borrow for the design portion of that. So that is happening at the same time, and that need is also important and critical. So.
And that committee next meets on Tuesday of next week,
Yeah.
if you'd like to see some of us again.
And that'll be recorded too. We're having those meetings recorded.
Yes.
Yep, it'll be in the library though. Oh, actually, I think we're trying to move it. We're moving it to the town hall because we have consultants calling in, and the cable studio can better support the online than us holding up the laptop. So we're going to do it at town hall, room 126, I think, first floor, select board meeting room.
The big room, yeah.
And I just have to say that Ingrid and Medora, and forgive me if I've left someone out, have been working on the possibility of a school expansion for several years, and it's a process, and unfortunately, in the fall, the advisory board asked, and correct me if I'm wrong, asked these two to kind of stop and let's ask for money to redo all the studies and look at
Other options.
modulars, trailers to be attached. So that's why I just want to, like, if someone's like, oh my goodness, it's going to be another, I'm spitballing here, 3 years. What have you all been doing, school committee? We've been working on this, but there are other people in town that we have to work with as well to get, their thoughts and feedback, and we kind of got a little delayed. So just putting it out there, it is not us.
That is certainly, from a timing standpoint, accurate. I mean, I think that what the reasoning behind an additional study also takes into account the fact that it's going to be a very expensive project. And so we're looking at increasing costs from an operating perspective across town in all departments. Those are not going to go away. The town has approved a few capital projects recently that are not inexpensive, and an expansion or a modular solution to growing enrollment here. One may or may not be marginally less expensive than the other. They're both going to be very expensive. And so I think the goal of everyone who's been involved in the conversation up until this point is to be sure that we are correct. Personally, anecdotally, from looking at a child who's now in high school go through the school system and having a child now at FK go through the school system, I know we have an enrollment problem. But I want to have, everyone wants to make sure that the data and the demographic studies that we've done support what we're going to try to do so it's the right fix that is fiscally responsible over the long-term life of the school district. But yes, it has certainly been looked at for a number of years. We've been working
since 2017 on this, so it's been a long process. But I would agree. I think there have been some significant economic changes in the last few years. You have the Tri-County project that was approved. The town desperately needed a new fire station. We had a global pandemic that wasn't expected. There's been significant inflation. So the financial picture is different for people, and I think the pushback is really around making sure that we are not overbuilding and that we are finding the best cost-effective solution so that we are not overtaxing the community. And so we're trying to work collaboratively and make sure we've explored all of these before we bring the final recommendation forward. Any other questions?
ESSER funding.
Yep.
It's a big issue. It was $170,000 that's dried up.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you could articulate for the community where the ESSER funding went.
Yep.
I know that there's an interest in keeping those positions that the ESSER funding has provided, but that's something that did not exist prior to the ESSER funding. And so just explaining to us why it is that those positions are being retained versus funding the rest of the ELA curriculum or starting a plan for math. You know, there's very big issues. The ESSER funding, I know, is a big deal.
Yep. So ESSER funding was provided to offset costs associated with COVID. Following the pandemic, we had some significant increased needs. We had academic recovery issues, so you can see students' math scores, ELA scores dropped. We also had significant increases in mental health needs of students. So ESSER funding had to be spent out by the end of this year. You cannot carry it forward. And we used that to bring in some critically needed positions. So we funded the math specialist position through ESSER funding, a portion of that. We funded a mental health professional through the ESSER funding. The majority of the rest of the ESSER funding went to the cost of safety gear, increased transportation costs because we were only able to have certain numbers of students on the buses, so other things that were COVID related. Now that the pandemic has passed, we still are not back where we were in terms of academics for students. So to continue to cut mental health staff when we're barely meeting the needs of the students doesn't make sense. So even though the funding source went away, the need for the positions has not. So we've retained the mental health staff. We are cutting a math specialist that was funded through ESSER, so that has sunsetted. So some of the positions have gone away. But a lot of that funding was offsetting additional costs too related to COVID around transportation, around safety gear for students, other kinds of things like that. And we're not purchasing that anymore.
We also had, I think, like a writing tutor that we provided during the hybrid model that.
Yeah, remote teachers we funded through the ESSER funding.
Those were eliminated shortly after the full return. So there was positions that we never carried forward.
Right. The only position that we've started with ESSER funding that we are continuing is a part-time school psychologist, and that need is prevalent. So. Any other questions?
Hi, Karen Murphy, 11 Bristol Pond. First of all, thank you. Obviously, no fun, and we appreciate all of your time and effort. What are the next steps for this? So you've got to this point. I'll let you elaborate. Thank you.
So after the public hearing, we will end the public hearing. The school committee will go into their regular operating meeting. We'll have discussion around the budget. The school committee has to vote to approve the proposed budget. From there, we present to the advisory board on March 27th at 7 o'clock. We will present the same presentation that we gave tonight, have discussion with the advisory board. The advisory board will make a recommendation, as they do every year, on the overall town budget and whether they support it or recommend it. Then it goes to town meeting, and at town meeting, the town and the community will vote to approve all of the various departmental budgets. Once it's approved, that becomes the operating budget, and then we move forward with planning for next year.
Is there is there a way that the community can push back on this budget in terms of, what if we don't agree that we should be cutting these positions? Is there something that we can do to advocate either to the town or to you all before you present the budget that, we're not in favor of this, in favor of these cuts, or is this basically, this is it, it's going for a vote and that's it?
So that's the opportunity that you have tonight. So you can share that feedback with the committee, and they'll consider it as they determine whether or not to vote to approve this budget. I would say if the town goes through and there's a motion to change the budget on the town floor, that funding has to come from somewhere else. So, again, all departments have made significant cuts, and I think the town is bringing forward a pretty significant proposal in terms of using available free cash. So if somebody was to make a motion to appropriate additional funding to the schools, I think you have to also state where that funding would come from. I think we've tried really hard to partner so that we would go into town meeting with a balanced budget. These cuts are challenging, but I think that to get the 4% and use these additional free cash, I think is fair. We're still receiving the majority of the new revenue that's generated in the town is still going back into the elementary schools. I think there was a total of around 800,000 in new revenue. We're asking for over 400 of it. So I think as hard as it is, and as much as we think these things are critical, we are going to make sure, no worries, we will put forward this new ELA program. If we have to make other reductions to do that, that is not going to come from staffing. We'll have to figure it out. We'll have to, whether it's supply cuts, things like that, we'll see where we get to with the budget freeze. We will see what we can access for grants, and then we will make it happen. If we have to not purchase some of the supplementary materials till the fall and talk about a capital project, we'll look at that, but the new program will come forward. So I think I would recommend, after working closely with the budget subcommittee, I think this is a fair budget. I think it's unfortunate, but I think that I don't know where else that would come from on the town side right now, given the other cuts that are making and what they're already appropriating and using for free cash.
We're still negotiating with this, well, with the sales people. Spent like an hour and a half, round one today.
Yep.
So I went item by item with the program to make sure that we are purchasing like all the necessities, but we're really trying to look very critically, like I'm looking at it very critically, like what is a must-have versus a nice-to-have. So, like I said, those numbers are still not finalized. He's gonna give me another proposal that I'm expecting at the end of the week, which we'll take a look with Ingrid and Miriam just to see like if there's anything else. We're trying to also leverage things like we've been really thoughtful about what PD we're able to provide this year, because I'm trying to save some PD money that we can kind of roll into for the ELA adoption and provide PD for next year. So like we knew that this was kind of coming, so we tried to really be like thoughtful about like how we're spending money this year. So,
Ingrid, can I comment?
Yeah.
So this is my 6th year on school committee, and it's nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. But I'm having deja vu from 2019 pre-pandemic and sitting here when back to the gentleman's question about is this something new? Is this something the budget crisis, is it going to continue on? And I'm like, yes, it is going to continue. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, the pandemic actually kind of helped stave it off for a while because we got the ESSER funds. And also, in a weird way, the operating costs went down because, some kids were at home. So it kind of pushed it off for quite a bit. But we were in this exact position. And back to what Ty was saying, like, I used to say all the time, like, can't the parents rally and like get in there and it's true. Like, we do have to work collaboratively. We have to share. We get the biggest piece of the pie, the schools. I don't like 60%, 70, 80, something like that.
It's in the 60s.
60s, but we have to share with police and fire, and Ingrid every year always. And the budget subcommittee, they do try to push the limit as much as they can. So I hear what everyone is saying, but if anyone, this is my last term, please, 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 if you, especially, I care about education, but my kids have kind of gone through it. It is not sustainable, and you can only cut so much trim before you are going to be cutting to the bone. And, I have my thoughts of what I would do as a taxpayer, but that's not my role right now. So that's it.
I agree with that. Just to piggyback on that, I don't like any of these reductions. They were very painful to make for all of us. Technology integration in the time we're in a technology-filled world, not ideal. Math specialists, our math scores have not recovered. But I think the entire town has a revenue problem that we share. And the way we're going to solve it is by working as partners and collaboratively. So when we make these reductions, all the departments are making them. The town is going into their free cash flow. We're going into our one-time revenue sources. We don't like it, but we are trying to number one, advocate for our students to make sure they all get the education they deserve. At the same time, we want to be good partners to the town. And we need to rely on each other because it's going to take all the towns working together to solve this. The schools can't solve it on their own. Town can't solve it on their own. We have to really come together and figure this out.
And I think somebody else brought up, we're also looking at having to bring forward a building project. We need town and community support for that. That has to pass at town meeting and at the ballot. So if we don't work collaboratively and work as good partners, we're not going to get the support for some of the critical other needs that we have coming in the next few years. So that's also something just to balance.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we don't work with the town, but my concern is we are bidding for a $250,000 curriculum and we only have half to pay for it.
Yeah.
And it has to go live in September. So that's very concerning to me that we're not going to be able to support our students. So my question was more so like, what is the recourse? What can be done? Because yes, we submit grants, but there's no guarantee that we're going to get those grants.
Yep.
So I'm just really concerned about where we are right now.
That said, and again, we are still working with the vendor around the program. The cost of $250,000 is for a 5-year implementation. That's the cheapest way to go. We could also purchase 3 years. There's flexible ways that we could look at that. The best cost return is to do a 5-year program purchase. But there are, again, we'll see how far we can get with the budget freeze to close that gap. We will continue to work on looking at those competitive grants, but we also might have to modify and purchase 3 years and then go for capital funding at another time through the town for that. But we will be implementing the new program. We do have a recommendation. We do have the half of the funds budgeted. We could shorten the time period that we're purchasing materials. We can look at supplemental materials. We are confident that with the strategies we have in place, we will be implementing and able to support that program for the fall. If we weren't, we wouldn't be making that recommendation. So we do have opportunities to shift how we're structuring the purchase to make sure that we can fund it for next year. Now you get to hear all our milk coolers go on, so I'm sure the vibration and the microphones, that's what that is.
Hear much over here.
I'm asking.
Yep.
Sorry, I just had one more question. I know this is a meeting about the budget, and so I don't want to go down the MCAS road.
Yep.
But did you say at the beginning that there was a more in-depth presentation?
Yep.
And when is that? Did I miss that?
Yes, so we did that, was that December? I think it was the December school committee meeting. We always do a full presentation of all of our MCAS scores, either in November or December, depending on when we get them back from the state.
So
it is recorded, it's online. And we also every year in February or either January or February do a benchmark and baseline report. And that is also posted on our website. That shows all of our MCAS scores, but it also shows you how we compare to those like communities.
Right.
So that's also in that report online.
Okay,
so
that's
both
what I was
sources.
looking for. So that's
yep.
Okay.
It's
and
right on the front of the website.
Do you know, did we fall above the state average or?
We're above the state average for our MCAS.
Okay.
And when you look at our comparison communities, it's different in math and ELA. We're not at the very bottom. We're more in the middle, but our scores aren't where we were, a couple of years back.
Thank you.
Sure.
And once you take a look, if anybody else is interested and you have any questions, there's a curriculum page also on the website which has all the information, like all our stats. But feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to set up a call with you or to meet with you and kind of go through if you have any questions. So.
Can I just 2 minutes of historical context? Because I realize I don't think this slide was in your presentation this year, and I do see new faces in the crowd. So one of the factors that has exacerbated where we are today, in addition to town revenue shortfalls and growing enrollment, is the fact that during the Great Recession, so way before anyone on this committee
2009.
or Ingrid was even involved in the school system. I think I was producing entrance into the school system at that point. But the cuts that were made to educational programming in the town
between 2009 and 2013
make this look like the best budget year ever. And I'm not saying that to justify this. I'm saying that in the wake of those cuts, we reduced educational programming and the resources made available to this district so drastically, as did everyone everywhere. that the subsequent years became a game of catch-up. During the game of catch-up, we began to see a dramatic spike in enrollment. So the town was a very good partner when it could be during those years from a fiscal standpoint. We had years where we had
Four and a quarter,
four and a quarter. I mean, budgets that were, healthy budgets, but those were recovering budgets. The idea was we want to get back what we lost, but you could not keep pace with the growth in enrollment. So looking at where we are now, we had never recovered fully from 2009 and 2010 to get to a point where we now have an almost unmanageable level of enrollment relative to our infrastructure resources here, coupled with a significant revenue shortfall within the town. So the town has been a good business partner with the schools whenever it could be. We had years during the pandemic where we made reductions and they were recovered at fall town meeting when revenue sources became available. No doubt from my own personal experience now in my 6th year on the school committee, that the town wants to work with the schools when it can. But as far as why we are in a situation where we're sort of continuing to get a little further underwater each year, that was a situation that did far predate this year. It has been percolating for quite some time at this point. And, for example, the Special Education Stabilization Fund that we advocated for in 2019 was because those of us that were part of the committee at that time, and certainly Dr. Ilardi, saw this coming. And so we are happy that we have those funds to access this year. But the only way to put more money back in that fund is to have an overage in your educational budget year over year, and I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon. So just to sort of paint the full contextual picture of where we've been and how we've ended up here, it's been a problem that's been growing. So, thank you.
All right, I think you can wrap up the public
last
hearing
round for questions, and we're gonna, no? Okay. All right. We can adjourn the public hearing and go into deliberation. So, public hearing adjourned. We would love it if everyone would stay for the full school committee meeting where we will deliberate this, but I will give a 3-minute interlude if anybody needs to get some. We will call the March 12th, 2024 Norfolk School Committee meeting to order. We will begin the meeting as we do all of our meetings by reading the mission statement of the district. The Norfolk Public Schools offers a safe, joyful, and challenging learning environment that meets the needs of our diverse students. Through school, family, and community partnerships, we provide an education that inspires lifelong learners and cultivates caring and productive citizens of our ever-changing world. Can we have a roll call?
Lauren Vivas.
Grace Lockhead. Lisa Sheldon.
Jennifer Nguyen.
Medora Champagne. Okay.
Vicky. Victoria Solana, I'm so sorry.
Ingrid Ilardi.
Miriam Goodman.
All right. I'm going to have to open my online agenda. So the first item we always have on our agenda is public comment. I don't know if we had anybody sign up or if anybody from the public has public comment they would like to offer the school committee. Not getting up to publicly comment. Okay. Wonderful. Moving on, we will move to correspondence, which we have several pieces. No, not several pieces.
One.
We have one, just one.
It was the letter that was read publicly at the last meeting from the...
So do we need to read this into the record? Or
No,
can
it was
be, okay.
just entered into public exhibit under correspondence this year, so it's available to the community and the public online.
It is a letter that was presented at our last meeting and read by a representative from, I think, our local CPAC. So if you would like a copy, we have copies, or it's publicly available. Next, we will move on to the school committee chair report. There is not a tremendous amount to report other than we will be having public budget deliberations and a vote this evening, so stay tuned for that, but we can move on to the superintendent's report.
Great. So first item tonight is a vote to approve the fiscal 2025 budget proposal. Again, Lisa and Lauren, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that from the subcommittee, but it is the budget as presented this evening.
I don't know if we're going to have like deliberations between the whole school committee. I did want to just kind of propose something or discuss something, and I'm slightly embarrassed because I probably should have thought of this prior and discussed it in the budget meeting. But I did want to talk about kind of like the administration line, and I don't know if that's something to discuss like in the future. I don't want to say it publicly, but like, what are other districts, and from what I see from Rentham and Plainville, when we talk about budget cuts, I feel like budget cuts kind of have to come from all the different lines. I think Rentham Elementary, they share a vice principal, if I'm not mistaken.
They share an assistant principal
An
between
assistant
two.
principal, and then Plainville, I don't believe, have any. So not to say that that position, obviously all positions that we're discussing and thinking about are vital to the running of our schools. I don't know if that's something anybody wants to discuss.
Yeah,
maybe something we should have talked about in
about the
budget, so I
administrative
apologize.
positions. So Rentham currently is sharing an assistant principal between the two schools. We have a full-time assistant principal in each school.
Yeah.
We have larger enrollment in both of our schools than both Plainville and Rentham. And that role has become absolutely critical here in terms of supporting students' behavioral, mental health needs, as well as teacher supervision and evaluation. So I know Rentham would desperately love to increase that position. Yeah. The other thing you hear, when we talked about the team chair, we have one team chair. It's a .8 position here. Rentham has 2 full-time team chairs. So they have different structures that take on some administrative functions there. We are, I think, pretty short-staffed in terms of our special education administration. Our assistant principals here do supervise and evaluate our special education staff, so structures look different.
Yeah.
Plainville had a pretty serious budget cut about, was it 2 or 3 years ago, where they had to lay off a large number of positions.
Yeah.
They are very understaffed, but their enrollment has also trended down, so they have much smaller enrollment in both schools. They would love to add an assistant principal position. It definitely changes the caliber of instructional supervision, support for students. They just don't have the revenue to do it. So I think in terms of overall administrative costs, Norfolk's operating costs for administration are lower than most of our comparison communities. So I think it's just a different structure in each community, how we support students.
I'm not trying to target anything. Yeah. I'm just hearing from the community and like their significant concern with some of these specialists, and so think about different ways we can.
I think for me, just reiterating what I said earlier, I don't think any of us like these cuts at all, but I think they are the ones that have the least impact, but there's still an impact. But I don't think I have to tell everyone here that this is a problem that we need to address. I think for this year, it does a good job protecting the core teaching positions, really giving the students what they need at this time. I don't like the use of the one-time funds, and I don't think any of us do, because next year we're coming from a worse position. We're kind of kicking the can down the road and we're not solving it, but I think it is our only option. And I think, again, showing support of the town, who's having to do the same thing this year, it is the right thing to do, even though it doesn't feel great. I think logically and financially, it's the correct thing to do.
I agree with Lisa. And Lauren, back to your point, I understand what you're saying about administration, but a different point of view to look at is when you have 2 separate schools and you have that many kids in each school, you really need 2 people in charge in case somebody's out or someone's in a meeting. And an administrator has different expertise or responsibilities, or they're like the leader, you know, you really need two people on deck, because it's chaos sometimes, like in a nice way.
Well, we're going to have 570 students here. That's very different. Traditional elementaries, you're talking 300 or 400. That's a significant, a significantly larger school size, and there are a lot of demands on it.
Again, my question with that wasn't targeting or saying that they're not.
It's good to discuss. I think we want to make sure that the public understands the budget.
Yeah, so we discussed it at KP too. So, you know, and then, you know, and other schools have different, you know, some have department heads. It's like, do you really
it's like when you look online and you see they don't have like a vice principal. Like, they have other structures that work for them, so I get it. Just trying to be not creative, but like, just
Push on it. It's a question.
think of different things where we can prioritize.
That's a good idea.
So I think we need a motion to vote on the budget.
And I will entertain a motion to vote on the fiscal year 2025 budget request.
So moved.
Okay.
Any further discussion at this point or deliberation? I would like to say thank you very much to Ingrid and the Budget Subcommittee. To describe this as a grim year, I think is not an overstatement and maybe an understatement. And I think it is, I don't think anyone thinks that you did this in a capricious way or enjoyed any part of this process or think that any of these reductions are eliminating redundant positions or positions that aren't necessary for educational programming. So it's not something that anybody would want to do. It's an unenviable task, and I am very appreciative of the work that went into it. So thank you.
I just wanted to say that I think you guys did a great job with what you had to work with, and it's really appreciated. My concern, like everybody else, is what's coming down the pike next year and the year after that. And I'm heartened to see that we had 10 people here from the public, so hopefully people are becoming informed and can, help us and the town get to a better place in the future, because it's not sustainable, and we have more and more kids coming. So, but for this year, I think we did the best with what we had.
Okay, all that said, all those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Adrian, can you shut the screen off just so it's not distracting? All right, next tonight we are thrilled to have, and I'm sorry that we kept you late, we're running behind, but we have Officer Katie Appel and, I'm sorry, I can't remember the last name. Yes, here to present the information on the DARE program. So Miriam, we're going to surrender your seat and I'll surrender mine. We have offered DARE, I think you have to come to the mic because you're being broadcast. Right. So we have offered the DARE program for a number of years. There's some updates to the DARE curriculum, and Katie and Ian are here to speak to those. So I'll share the microphone and jump out, and you guys can have a seat.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name's Officer Katie Appel. I'm the school resource officer here in Norfolk. For those of you who don't know me, I've been the SRO in Norfolk. This is my second full school year. Half my salary is paid by the King Philip District, so I spend a lot of time at our middle school, which we all know is regional. So we have Plainville, Rentham, and Norfolk. This is John King.
Hello.
You can introduce yourself.
I'm Officer King. I've been here in Norfolk for about 2.5 years, be 3 years in November. I've been fortunate enough to come with Katie now to teach DARE. We'll talk about that more, but this is my first year with Katie, and we'll go from there. But yeah.
Yeah, so this is my second. I was the full-time SRO last year. We have a part-time SRO, Steve Hamilton, and per new police reform, you have to go through all the SRO training and standards in Massachusetts to be a police officer and teach anything inside schools now. So John's also SRO certified, which is awesome for us. I taught DARE last year in the wake of Officer Plimpton, who has been around for maybe before we were born, I'm not sure. Yeah, so he's been so DARE was established in the early 80s. A lot of you are probably like, we can't believe DARE is still a thing, but Mrs. McNeely can talk to, were you there as long as Officer Plimpton has been? No? Okay, see?
I'm going to say yes after you said that.
And Officer Plimpton is an amazing guy who was fortunate enough to retire and is living his best life. So we, in the wake of him, had big shoes to fill. But as the years have passed, the DARE curriculum has really shifted into something completely different than it was before. So I actually have I went through DARE. I graduated high school in 1999. So in 4th grade, I went through DARE, and I was presented with what is the DARE suitcase, which is behind me, and I'm happy to show it to you. When you open it up, it literally has a bunch of they're fake drugs, but it's drugs with lines of cocaine and all of these things that we used to essentially introduce, not we, but the old DARE process was introducing kids to all of these like hardcore drugs. And the idea was that they knew what they looked like to stay away from them. Well, anyway, DARE has shifted over the last 6 or 7 years into a completely different curriculum that entails And I should also preface it with, so last year we did the elementary level DARE. I thought it was too juvenile for the kids. The new DARE curriculum, middle school lessons are designed 6th through 8th grade. A lot of middle schools throughout the country are 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Norfolk just happens to be 7th and 8th. So that's why we've shifted into the middle school lessons. I thought last year was too juvenile. It was a lot of like cartoony stuff. And these kids are moving on to middle school, which I'll talk about because I do a lot of work there. And kind of explaining why the middle school lessons are more so important now than the elementary ones as they move forward. So anyway, so the program itself has shifted from like teaching kids about drugs. The only drugs that are really discussed in the new DARE curriculums are alcohol, nicotine, and THC, marijuana, because those are the 3 most abused and seen drugs by kids of this age group. So it's not necessarily introducing it to them. What DARE does in a scaffolding process is teach kids how to build the confidence up to say no, not just to drugs, but we talk about confident communication, healthy relationships. A big one is going to be online safety. Vaping is huge. Just between last year and this year in the middle school, there is a significant increase of vapes. I'd say at least 3 to 4 times a week. The school is advising me of the vapes that they're pulling off kids, and they shifted last year from nicotine, and now most of them are THC vapes, which is marijuana, the oil that's in marijuana. So that's been an uptick. The online safety stuff is a huge increasing issue at the middle school between sex trafficking, kids younger, mostly younger girls dating boys that are much older that they're meeting online, Snapchat bullying, all these things. So we have very specific lessons on that. The online safety training that we're going to be doing is NASRO, the National School Resource Officer Organization, certified. Every lesson is designed to be age appropriate, so obviously we're not talking about the same things that we talk to high school kids that we talk to the middle school kids. But that's essentially, what am I missing?
The risks and consequences, like everyday risks that they take going into like middle school and high school. But yeah, like what we talked the past couple weeks, like the risks that they'll be taking in life. It's not all just about drugs and alcohol. It's more of like what they're going to be seeing, like being respectful to others. That sounds kind of corny, but it's like honestly just being like a good person and making the right choices. Like we're not just coming in there and being like, no, you can't drink, you can't do drugs, like all that stuff. But we talk about everyday life and what they're going to be obviously facing with the next.
Yeah, and we know there's been some concerns in general, and like whether it be in this community or other communities with other DARE officers that we're overexposing kids. Well, I can tell you that especially being in the middle school every day, it's not us that's overexposing these kids, it's all the online stuff specifically. 3 kids mentioned cocaine in our 6th grade classes today. Like we don't, we'd say, I don't even remember what the question was specifically, but the kids brought up.
Like I asked, what's the 3 most common drugs that are used by teenagers in high school, and one of the kids was like cocaine, and I'm like,
yeah, a couple kids mentioned cocaine, and we were like, oh, okay, but we never, like our DARE curriculum never mentions cocaine, so it's
it's the social media.
Yeah, so that fear, like kids are and this is just my opinion, what I'm seeing in the schools is that it's the overexposure, so we're trying to identify the areas where kids can build the confidence, and most of the time these kids are put in uncomfortable situations that they want to get out of, so understanding and teaching them that most kids don't do drugs. So when they're presented with a situation, it's like they're not feeling as much peer pressure to remember that 90% of kids, don't want to date someone who smokes or vapes. And, 84% of kids have never even seen marijuana or cigarettes and things like that. So what else? Yeah, we're, and just in town from a police perspective, we're seeing maybe in the wake of COVID, an uptick of domestic issues, kids who have had significant trauma, whether they're moving into town, and then of course the demographic of them moving up to middle school, they're going to be mixed with kids of, all 3 of these towns have different demographics, it's just the way it is. So they're mixed with kids who come from different backgrounds, they're essentially moving out of the Norfolk bubble, like we call it. So it's important for them to understand that, that they might be faced with it, even though they might not understand it or have experienced it now. They could be, and so we want them to build the confidence to be able to get themselves out of a situation. And again, it goes back to conflict with parents, how to deal with personal relationships. adults that might make them uncomfortable and how to respectfully say, voice their opinion. Even though they're a kid, they still have the right to voice their opinion. So it's a buildup of this stuff. So that was a lot. But does anyone have any questions about any of
I
it?
think one of the things that you and I talked about, Katie, is it's much more of a focus on resiliency, making good choices, how to get out of situations, how to keep yourself safe in communities and online communities that it used to be in the past. So it's not just the drug focus, it aligns with our SEL instruction, it aligns with the health standards, and it's more a focus on empowering kids to get themselves or exit situations that feel unsafe. Is that correct?
Well, even like today too, we talked about like they're going to be getting their driver's license obviously within the next 12, 13, so about 3-4 years of getting their license. We talked about seatbelt safety, like rules of the road,
Bicycle safety.
Yeah, bicycle safety.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things
So
in
it's
there
almost
that.
like, again, like everyone always like, oh, it's DARE. You just tell kids don't do drugs, and but it's a lot more than that.
I think it's great. I work in a middle school, and it's real. It's real, and I guess my question as a parent of a child in 8th grade, I think it's great that you're talking about the trafficking. I've seen my daughter will show me some stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, that person looks like she's 20. Like what? And so, do you get into do you talk about how to recognize if someone is trying to manipulate you into doing something?
So we'll touch on it a little bit, but it's tough. So 6th grade is really young.
Oh,
6th grade is real. Well, so it isn't. We've seen kids, there's kids dating in 6th grade now, and we address it in middle school. I have stuff lined up in middle school where I'm teaching with the adjustment counselors where it's more age appropriate, because there are, in fact, I have girls coming into my office pretty frequently saying, I met this kid online and now he's harassing me. He lives in Maryland. He's posted my phone number. He's calling me names. 13-year-olds dating 19-year-olds. There's a lot. They're going on Snapchat to meet up to buy vapes, and they're exchanging it for favors that we can all. It's implied of what we're talking about. Yeah. So it is real, and But so to your point, we will discuss it, but it's more going to be about situational awareness stuff, and we teach little kids stranger danger, but it's more of recognizing people being strange versus strangers, because we all meet strangers all the time, but recognizing strange behavior. I give the example to them, and most of the middle school kids are shocked. I just did it the other day, and I said, if I go online and say, I'm trying to date a 20-year-old, would you think that's weird? And they're like, no, not really. And then I make them guess how old I am. And this is not to pat myself on the shoulder. I think John thought I was 26 or whatever. Yeah. But when I tell them, I say, okay, well now I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be 43 in May, and they're like, oh. And I said, do you think it's weird now that I'm trying to go online and date a 20-year-old? And they're like, yeah, that's kind of weird. And I said, okay, so how do you know this kid? He says he's 16 and he looks really cute in his picture, but how do you know? Because he lives in Maryland, that he's 16. And they're like, oh. But it is just a lack of education, because we've never really talked to. I was never spoken to about that stuff, But so yeah, I think it's just a lack of education and overexposure, and a skewed view of what healthy relationships are, because they're only seeing. A lot of times they're seeing stuff online. So we'll make it age appropriate about signs to look for to stay safe online. We're not friends with friends on social media. We're only friends with people we've met in person, and here's why. We don't go and meet anyone. We never meet someone online and go out to meet them in a private area. It's always, it's meet them at the mall where there's a lot of people type of thing. So, and then as you get into middle school, because they've heard about it, they've seen it from friends, then you start to get into the actual personal experiences of that stuff. So, hopefully that answered your question a little bit. Okay.
Thank you.
I think a lot of parents are surprised at what kids are being exposed to, especially online at a younger and younger age. So after you do the lessons, do you send, is there any type of sheet that goes home to parents saying these are the topics we talked about, or does it really just stay in the classroom?
No,
I get very little information from what my son learns at school. So.
Yeah. Some days we feel like we're
the whole grade before DARE starts, talking about what topics will be introduced, and then the DARE curriculum is
available, Katie's available for questions, but I don't think you send a daily.
No, we don't send a daily thing. So we try to keep it consistent. So there's sixth grade classes. So we have a schedule through, is it the beginning of June? Yeah, so we're doing probably 9 weeks. The full DARE curriculum is 10 weeks, but we might have to consolidate the last because of the scheduling and stuff. But so at least 9 weeks. And so of those 9 weeks, it's spread through June. And so we have 6 classes in 1 week, and we're repeating. We try to stay consistent, but of course the kids ask questions, so it kind of veers a little bit, or things that we think of. But generally, the topics stay the same. We have little homework books. You can take a look at, these are the booklets they all get. So we do the activities that are in the booklets, which stay in the classroom just so the kids don't lose them. And then we have homework booklets that you can also take a look at that are optional. We told the kids that if they complete them, they'll get a prize or whatever at the end, just as an incentive, but we're not homework people, so we don't, we didn't do that well at school. So, yeah, so, so I mean, in the biggest piece of DARE, at least in my opinion, and you can say why you're doing it, but it's to build a relationship between the police and the community and the kids. So and I've seen the difference between last year and this year of unfortunately we only get to really know the Norfolk kids at an elementary level, but when they come into middle school, they're they know me and they're comfortable, and those are the kids that are coming into my office and feel comfortable talking about stuff that's going on at home and things like that. So the relationship building between us, the police, and the kids is huge, because again, we don't want to talk about it or know about it, but there's a lot of stuff in the community, in all 3 communities, and we're seeing these kids outside of school and inside of school. So it is important for everybody that they have a safe adult to go to.
This week is my 2nd week, and I've already I work through the 3 to 11 shift, so I'm off at 11. I've been to the Walgreens a couple times, and just even driving around, I've already gotten so many waves, and that's Officer King or whatever, and I'm like, I don't remember seeing this kid, but they remember you in the school for sure. I mean, it's only been 2 weeks. I can't even imagine doing this for how long OP's been doing it. I mean, he was a legend in this town forever. He still is, and I think every kid knows him. But even again, in 2 weeks, I've already gotten I'll hear my name when I'm just driving around with my window down. Today, for instance, I was at the HOD and kids were waving out the window already. So.
Now, do you guys get to bring Officer Mitch around, or does he have a different handler? Your Officer Mitch's
No. No, so there's Mitch. Sergeant Schwenier was the school resource officer prior to me. He was a patrolman. When he got promoted to sergeant, he lost the SRO position because that's just what happens, so he's on the midnight shift. Mitch stayed with him because he's, on top of being a police dog, he's a family dog, so he is bonded with Joe's family. The beautiful thing is that we get to rent him whenever we want, so if I say I need Mitch, he'll just bring him in and I pick him up, or we just arrange it. We also have Harper, who's our fire department's dog, same training as Mitch, so, and she lives here, she belongs to Kate on the fire department, so today and yesterday, Monday, we had we had Harper, so it's just between the 2 dogs, we at least have one of them both times, so they're both CRD, community resource dogs, they were both trained at Gofi, and the kids love them, so yeah, it's awesome, it's good. Go ahead. Oh.
I apologize, just from a parliamentary standpoint, we can't have engagement with the public, but something tells me that either officer would be happy to engage with you outside the scope of the formal meeting to answer questions.
Yes.
I had a quick question, just because thinking of DARE when I was a kid, I think it was an opt-in program. Is this you go into the classroom for all the kids, or do the parents have to opt them into this?
It's my understanding that it's worked into the curriculum. So the only thing that we were trying to work in a field trip this year. Oh, that was the other thing I want to talk about is the vision goggles. If we were to take a field trip, we're not doing it this year, we might organize it next year, but if we were to take a field trip, it's my understanding that that would be the only thing they can opt out of, but DARE is worked into the curriculum, so they can't opt out of it?
It's not like a club or something, you go
No, it's, yes.
I feel like when I was a kid, it used to be like a club that you would kind of join, that they would take you out during lunch or something. I was just wondering.
Oh, no, yeah, sorry, so we have an hour block in each 6th grade class.
Gotcha.
It's 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., so 2 classes back to back, and then Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays we go in. But yeah, and then the other thing, I don't know if anyone's heard of the Safe Coalition, but it's a phenomenal organization, excuse me, that started to assist people with substance abuse. They're out of Franklin now, but they service all towns in Norfolk County. Jen Levine runs it. She also works in conjunction with the district attorney's office. They offer, it used to be called Fatal Vision Goggles, also known as beer goggles. They have designed a program that they can make age appropriate for any age group. So we're going to have the Safe Coalition, Jen Levine and her coworkers from the district attorney's office come in with the kids. They bring the goggles. And it's supposed to be it's a fun day where they set up an obstacle course, and you put the goggles on and you're throwing beach balls to really truly understand how a substance like alcohol, I think they do alcohol and marijuana goggles, can affect your cognitive judgment and really do affect how you feel. It's optional for the kids. If they don't feel comfortable participating in it, then they don't have to. But they call them safe goggles. And again, it's very specifically designed to be age appropriate. We're not talking about being drunk. It's just how a medication could affect your body. We talk about prescriptions and how to read prescription bottles. In the event that a kid, especially going into middle school, they have to go to a summer camp and they have to administer their own medications. We talk about how to read the bottles so that they understand that. So, what else? I just blew through a lot of topics. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it. If anyone wants to take a look at these books, we can just leave them.
Let me leave these ones here.
Yeah, we could. Do you want us to leave these?
That'd be great. Sure. Thank you.
If a parent had a question, I'm sorry, if a parent had a question, how would they get a hold of you?
The information of our SROs is in the family handbook with contact information, and I think it's also in the letter you sent to the 6th grade. I think it's in there too.
Should be.
Yep. So the contact's in the family handbook, and I think in the DARE letter, we did send home to all of the 6th grade parents before the program started.
Yeah,
and I think I sent it to the school committee, so you saw it too.
Thank you all for having us.
And I would just say, before they go, we are so blessed to have school resources officers that are super involved in the schools. Katie is here all the time and starred in our student staff basketball game not too long ago. But it's great, and the kids really enjoy that. And it is just such a value add to have both officers that kids know and connect to as another adult that you can go to if you have any concerns or feel unsafe. So it's a great bonus for our schools. So thank you very much.
Thank you very
much.
much.
For coming.
Thanks.
Okay. And again, the DARE the curriculum was adopted by the district prior to my coming here. So we've had it in place, I think, Cheryl, how long? 100 years. 100 years is the technical, but it does align with the health standards on healthy, making safe choices, keeping your body healthy and safe. So it aligns with that. But these materials are here if people want to take them and look at them. All right. Next in the packet is school choice. Let me just get to the right exhibit. Every year, the district, it's the policy of the Norfolk schools to admit non-resident students under the terms and conditions of the inter-school district law, but the school committee has the right to opt out. You have to make that decision prior to June 1st every year. Historically, in all the years that I've been here, every year the school committee has opted out of school choice and has not allowed residents from other communities to attend, primarily because the preference has been to keep a small class size student-teacher ratio. As you can see, our class sizes are already growing. If you do accept students into the school choice program, you do receive tuition funds. So some districts do that to bring in revenue. But if you accept a student, they are guaranteed to be able to continue through the, grade 6 within the district. And often the cost or what you get in new revenue doesn't offset the cost of actually educating the child. So it would be my recommendation, based on the budget situation and the enrollment situation and the space situation we are in, that the school committee vote to opt out of school choice. Happy to take any questions.
I think you've given a pretty thorough overview of both what would be involved in school choice and the current situation in Norfolk, so we can certainly deliberate further, but to get the ball rolling, I would entertain a motion to withdraw from participating in school choice for the coming school year.
I'll make a motion to withdraw from school choice for the upcoming school year.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion or deliberation? From my standpoint, in a year where we are underfunded, losing positions, and continuing to face growing enrollment in limited space, I can't see the value add, unfortunately, of opening the district to non-Norfolk residents for educational purposes.
Agreed, and again, this is my 6th year, and every year we have opted out because the amount of tuition just never equates to actual cost of a student. So.
Well, that's assuming you have space for the student.
But let's even pretend, it's such a great, moneymaker. It isn't, so, hard no.
Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor, so it's an affirmative vote, but we are voting to withdraw. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes, and we are withdrawn for the coming school year from school choice.
Great. Next is the Student Opportunities Act, and I think Vicki's going to give a brief overview of that, and I'll turn it to you, Vicki.
Thank you. So the next part needs a vote, but I just want to give you a little bit of a background about what the Student Opportunity Act is and how it's related to Chapter 70. So the Student Opportunity Act and Chapter 70 are both pieces of legislation in Massachusetts aimed to ensure that all children have access to a quality education. Chapter 70 establishes like a formula they use by the state to distribute funds to local school districts, taking into account factors like student enrollment and community wealth. The Student Opportunity Act, or the SOA, passed in 2019, builds upon Chapter 70 by providing additional resources to schools, particularly those serving students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The goal of these two legislations is to reduce educational disparities by increasing funding for essential services and programs in order to create a more equitable education. So having said that, currently approximately 23% of our Norfolk Public School budget is funded through Chapter 70. Based on the relative wealth of the town, we are designated as a minimum aid community. So that means that we get about $30 per student in the funding.
For the SOA?
For the SOA, for the Student Opportunity Act. And there's no, I don't think that's going to increase. But regardless of that, every school district is required to make a 3-year plan on how we're going to address some of the disparities that we have in our community. So the state has...
In order to receive the SOA funding.
In order to receive, yeah, thank you. So there was a very specific rubric that I had to follow to be able to create the plan, so this is why it's structured the way it is. And the areas that were identified as our priority areas, I had to use our MCAS data, and then the state created what they call a student outcome comparison tool. It is, you can see any community. It's through the DESE website, but it basically, it's like a heat map. I don't know if you've ever seen one, but it breaks down our, by demographics, our different student populations, and you can see the map is from blue, like that means that the group is accessing education successfully, to a dark red, and it kind of ranges if there is a disparity. So I know that during the MCAS presentation and our equity audit report and our district improvement plan, we talked a lot about one of the areas that we identified where we have a gap is between our students with disabilities as compared to their peers in terms of performance. So another area that the heat map kind of identified was also our low-income students. So I used those two areas, those two student subpopulations, to be able to craft the plan. So just going through it super quickly, the Section 1, which basically just summarizes some of our goals, I really pulled from our district improvement plan in terms of what our goals are, such as adopting our new ELA curriculum, really focusing on tiered supports, and being able to kind of do ensure that we're really using a data-driven process to be able to identify which areas we need to kind of enhance and support our students with. So the first section kind of just talks in more detail about it. The second section identified our 4 critical areas for requiring attention. So I listed those, and like I said, it's based on our data, it's based on what our other plans kind of have already identified that you voted on. Early intervention and readiness, really just looking at our different student groups, making sure we've adopted a new literacy screening tool, and really leveraging that data to be able to address any gaps that the tool has identified in terms of reading. The other area is strong research-based core program, which we talked about having the importance of having an ELA program. The third goal is potential impact on disrupted learning on writing skills. So that was an area that in our MCAS scores that's taken a little bit of a dip than from our previous. So we're really looking into how we can support students with increasing their writing skills and abilities. And then the last area, which actually was from feedback that we received from a school, our PTO member, was to really highlight more of looking at our current ELA assessment practices to ensure that we have high quality assessments that effectively facilitated targeted interventions. So that is something that was in the plan already, but her feedback was that she just thought it was important enough for us to kind of highlight it. So I've added to the plan. And with the new ELA program, it comes with a pretty robust assessment tool. So I'm really looking forward to kind of unpacking that. So that's going to be part of our process. And one of the things I kind of failed to mention before is the reason I got feedback is because we shared the plan with different stakeholders. So I sent a plan and shared it with our NTA president and vice president to kind of for feedback. I've shared it with our administrators. We shared it with our school councils, as well as
Leaders group.
I'm sorry?
The parent
leaders group, thank you. And I brought it before you. So like, I just wanted to make sure that the plan felt that it was really reflective of kind of what we have been seeing, because I have to submit it for review to the state on April 1st. So you can kind of see, it kind of goes through, it asked me to kind of identify some things that we're already doing in terms of how we are communicating with families, making sure that they're part of they have a voice in schooling and being able to have an opportunity to provide feedback in various aspects. And then basically, like I said, I just kind of took those 4 goals and expanded on them. So I'd love any thoughts about the plan, and like I said, ultimately I'm looking for a vote if we're ready to do that.
Are there any questions before we look for a motion? No, I think you covered everything for SOA, identifying the needs and having a measure to implement them as best as you can. Again, tough when you're down some specialists, but thank you for your hard work.
Sure, I appreciate that.
It's very thorough.
I was going to say thank you for putting this together. It's really important work for our students who need it. So
it's a good process to go through. I have to say, like, even for our own reflection, like, I really wanted to be, if you have to do it, I felt might as well make it meaningful, right? So it was, like I said, it kind of helped me kind of wrap my head around a little bit of like what are immediate next steps too. So
I think this just highlights another example of what the state is asking administrators to do, right? Because this is somewhat new.
It started in 2019. There was a review done of the Chapter 70 formula, which has really, it needs significant overhaul. It's not keeping up with inflation, so we need to be advocating. Part of the funding situation we're in, we need more funding from the state for education. The way that they tried to adjust Chapter 70 was by adding the Student Opportunities Act, which gives you additional $30 per student, but it comes with requirements. So that's what it is. So it's been since 2019.
Yeah, but one of the changes that I kind of spoke to is that before, if you were a minimum aid community, you had like the short form versus if you were like in like a bigger community, you had the long form. And then this year they said everybody has to do the long form, regardless if you get like $3,000 per student or $30. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I said, like the state keeps changing those regulations.
All right, so looking for a motion to approve the very thorough, long-form Student Opportunities Act plan.
So moved. I'm done belly aching about it. So.
Can we get a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, the last two items I have for you tonight are very quick. We've talked before that we were in an audit cycle for the civil rights standards and the second portion of the special education standards. It was a federal audit administered by the state. We have had a year of what they call self-study, where we've had to upload documentation of how the district's meeting a variety of different regulations. And we went through that process last week. DESE was on site and did tours of both buildings. They interviewed staff, administrators, parents. They also sent out parent surveys to all students receiving special education services regarding compliance with federal and state regulations. We had the exit meeting, the preliminary exit meeting on Thursday, which is the end stage of the process, and at this time they anticipate we are going to have no corrective action and no findings, which is a miracle because it has been huge. You can go online and see all the other reports. If you do have areas of non-compliance, you're required to develop a corrective action plan and report regularly to the Department of Ed your progress towards correcting those. So it can be very cumbersome if you have a lot of findings and corrective action. I think it's very rare to have no findings, so that's a tribute to the hard work of our special education department, as well as our HR director, who makes sure that we are compliant with all policies and regulations regarding hiring. The recommendations from the team that was on site go to the supervisor to review to make sure that they're in agreement, so we don't have the final report, but overall, I think the district did really well and has really strong policies and programs in place. So. That is happy to report that. The final report, when it comes, will come to the committee, but it also has to be in the library and a lot of public locations. So we should have that within 60 days.
Wonderful.
And then last, we reviewed my goals at last meeting, but we didn't have it scheduled for a vote, so I need to request a vote to approve my professional goals for 24-25.
Okay, which we did discuss.
We reviewed and discussed, we just didn't have it listed for a vote.
Just did not have it, so for our, we still have an audience. For our audience, we did discuss and review what we are about to vote on at our last meeting. So looking for a motion to approve the superintendent's goals as stated in the exhibit and at our last meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? We had some discussion. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Committee reports. King Philip
has not met since my last report, and our big budget meeting is Monday, March 18th, 7 p.m. KP High School Library.
Okay. So. Good to know. And then we don't have a budget report tonight because you guys have been doing all the reporting, so you are off the hook there. And then policy met immediately prior to the public hearing. We have obviously nothing really for review or a vote at this point, but we anticipate next month bringing forward several policies that exist within our current policy framework that are either redundant or in need of updating. So there'll be a few things that we'll have to talk about that are either incidental changes or policies that were sort of incorporated into our policies when they were sent over from MASC, but aren't necessarily required because we address them elsewhere in our different policies. So we're trying to streamline things. That's the update. And new items. Oh, we are in the home stretch. Okay. Looking to renew a school partnership with the very well-known, I think at this point, Norfolk Recreation Department. I could go on and on. I shan't, in the interest of time. No disrespect.
They're great partners.
No disrespect to the rec department.
Yeah.
But we would just be looking for a motion to renew the school partnership with the Norfolk Recreation Department.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
We have a set of minutes from February 29th, 2024. I'm assuming we all did our homework and looked at those beforehand. Any comments or questions before we, okay. Looking for a motion to approve the February 29th, 2024 school committee meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Next scheduled school committee meeting would be April 9th. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Tuesday?
Yep.
It's a Tuesday.
When do we have spring town meeting?
May.
May 14th, I think it is. It's the second Tuesday of May.
When,
When is it?
This year, Wednesday, the 15th.
I'm just wondering, and when?
Election's beginning of May. You're on the hook for the April meeting.
Yes. The April meeting will be your last meeting.
You'll
yes.
be joining us on April 9th.
There you go.
Okay, I think we've done it, folks. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. You all
you
win
so
a
much.
prize. Thank you for sticking it out with
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you for coming.